And all right, I think we are running live around the world here.
What?
Yes.
Yeah, anyone can see you now.
Yeah, we're live streaming it so that people can learn Torah with us, not just who are able to log in this second. Okay. All right, I believe.
I'll put my code here, but.
Yes, I do. Okay. All right, so we're rolling. Good morning to everybody.
Good morning.
Hey, thank you. Hi, Tommy. On Zoom today. I need the sheets here. Shlomo, you need? Thank you. You're welcome. All right, so we're in Reish Ayin Beis or Ayin Reish Beis, depending on your preference, and we were up to Sif Ches. Last week we had I just kind of hinted or teased at the Sif Ches, so let's read it now. Remember, the topic has been what can we make Kiddush upon, and the guiding rule is generally the things that have issues to be used as nesachim on the mizbeach, as wine libations on the mizbeach. You know, if they're only b'di'evet an issue, then lechatchila it's fine for kiddush and on Shabbos. And so we continue down this road here. Though actually that road is coming to an end pretty soon. So Sif Ches. Oh, here Richie's here. Let's pass him.
Is the road at the
Okay.
end?
No, I think it's just a new street suit. Mekachin al yayin mevushal ve'al yayin sheyesh bo dvash. V'yesh omrim she'ein mekachin aleim. Like any good Jewish topic, we have two opinions here. One that says yes and one that says no. So the first opinion presented is that you may make kiddush on a wine that is cooked, and ve'al yayin sheyesh bo dvash, on wine which has in it honey. And I believe so. A big shout out to my brother, who is one of us who follows along after our live shir. So he pointed out this to me. This is called mead, right? MEAD, mead, honey wine. Anyone here had consumed it?
Yes, there's one on the market now. It's called apple wine. You
Okay.
can get it at the at the wine store in the Golden Horseshoe.
Uh-huh.
It's
Have you tried it?
yeah, it's okay. One of my sons loves it, but
You're much kinder than my brother's review of he did not like it. That was what he texted me.
I mean, if you're comparing it to a good cab, there's no comparison.
Right. So okay, yeah, exactly. The taste was certainly not as preferred by the two reviews now that I've heard. Yeah, Shlomo. Who is that? Reverse okay, for sure. Yeah.
So why does it say opinion? There's opinion, but there's no. There's showing also. He should be making a decision here, so we can see his.
Right. That's not uncommon for him to quote two opinions. There is some. I don't want you to take this to the bank. What I'm about to say. There are some scholarly articles out there. I feel like there was one that whenever Rav Yosef Karo presents an opinion, then a yesh omrim, then really he paskins like the first opinion. I wouldn't take that to the bank though, because I don't think it's 100% of the time. But look, I mean, it is important to know when certain, just on a broad stroke, it's important to know that there are multiple opinions, because sometimes circumstances are such that you need another opinion to rely upon.
But he made his decision based on several,
Yeah, for sure. He in the Beis Yosef, which he wrote previous to the Shulchan Aruch, he gives you all the opinions. He'll cite all the Rishonim. He'll give you the Gemara. He'll give you the Rishonim. He gives you all the sources. And the Shulchan Aruch, he tried to whittle it down to what do we do, and so. There's what to talk about when he cites the Yesh Omrim, another opinion. What's the purpose? Maybe there are maybe it's that there are two valid approaches to something. So anywho, so we have here the discussion of Yayin Mevushal. Let's get to that first, and then we'll talk about the mead afterwards. So let's go to Sifkat and Yud Tes. Yes. This is the Mishnah Berurah is a commentary on the Shulchan Aruch. Shulchan Aruch is a is putting together all the sources of the commentators on the Gemara, and the Gemara is the Torah Shebaal Peh on the Torah Shebichtav. So there you go. You got a little tradition, understanding of our tradition. Okay, so Tivkat and Yotef Al Yayin Mevushal v'Chulei. Now, Svirale de Al Yedei calls there through the cooking process. Calls the ein mishtana hayayin ligriusa. According to the first opinion, it doesn't change the wine to be of lower quality. It doesn't make it worse. Maybe it wasn't great to start with, but it doesn't make it worse. V'hayesh omrim sviralahu, but the yesh omrim believe the mishtana ligriusa, that indeed through the cooking process, this wine decreases in terms of its value, not in terms of maybe monetary as well, but like in terms of the quality, I should say, not value. The quality goes down. Va'afilu borei pri hagafen, according to the second opinion, the poskim behind the second opinion, they believe that you don't make a borei pri hagafen on a wine that is cooked. By the way, who is the main source of this opinion? So, by the way, this is where the Aruch HaShulchan comes in nice and handy. Though I think the Be'er HaGola gives this as well. But the main source of this is the Rambam. The Rambam, I'll just read it for you. Harambam kasav degam mevushal pasul lekiddush. That if the Rambam held that wine that has been cooked is pasul for kiddush, you can't even use it with the evet for kiddush. This is really the opinion of the Rambam, which, by the way, to your question, Shlomo, maybe why there's some deference being given here to the Yesh Omrim. But also, the Aruch HaShulchan asks, you don't have this in front of you, the Gam B'Shem Rashi, it's quoted in the name of Rashi, Rashi thought that wine that was cooked doesn't get a Borei Pri Hagafen anymore. It's been lowered to the status of Shehakol, which, of course, if you're saying Shehakol, for sure it's not Kiddush. It can't count for Kiddush anymore. Now, the whole slew of Rabbanim who, Rabbeinu Tam, and the Ri, and the Itur, and the Rosh, all hold that Mavushal is kosher l'Kiddush, and of course you make a Borei Pri Hagafen on it, and they give a different explanation, which I'll go through in a second. But this is the source of the Machlokes. I want to just read you from my additional comments something that is important.
The Rambam and then Rashi's opinion can be ignored versus the others.
Which is why I said I think he's giving deference to their voice. But at the end of the guiding principle of the Shulchan Aruch when it came to Psak Halacha, his first guiding principle was he took the big three. Okay, before there was such a big thing as a big three in basketball, the big three. The big three, there was a halachic big three. There was the Rif, the Rambam, and the Rush. And the Shulchan Aruch says, the Rav Kara said, I'm going to follow the majority of the house. Literally said, Rov Habayis. And so if there are 2 out of 3 of them would hold a certain way, we'll pass it a certain way. It's not you can't take that always 100% because you see too many exceptions to the rule, but it's mostly the case, which of course means that the deck is stacked against the Ashkenazim because the Rif and the Rambam almost walk together in lockstep. And sometimes the Rush might present a different approach, which maybe represents the more, the Bali Atosta, something like that. So it's not that's why the Rama has to come and do what he does. But sometimes here the Rambam holds one way, the Rush is on the other team. I don't know exactly where the Rif falls into this category, into this argument. So he was Ashkenazi, the Rush. Right. He moved to Spain because under duress. He was chased out. The Ashkenazim were not feeling. They saw the writing on the wall, basically, that things were not going well there. That's why the Tur, who was the Rush's son, he was very well aware in his life of the Ashkenazi approach, but he knows what the Ramban has to say in the Rambam, and they were very well versed in the Sephardic minhagim as a result of that. Okay, so bottom line is here. I don't know why, but they're not. You're not ignoring him. It gives them the airtime. But we're going to see that the Ramah for sure is going to hold like the first opinion. But okay, now I wanted to read you my extra comment here because the Yayin Mevushal is there's a very charged words in our language, and coming off of Purim, Yayin Mevushal. What is there were a lot of wine bottles that were probably consumed, and everyone's looking at this one's Mevushal, this one is not Mevushal. Let's talk about it a little bit more for a second. So in my extra notes here, so you don't have this, so just listen. Although maybe Tommy, you have it. It's note number 17 if you're following along. So v'chol ze le'inyan yayin mevushal mishum shetam hayayin mishtana legrusa. When we talk about yayin mevushal, issue or not an issue, it all comes down to is the taste, is the flavor of the wine changing for the worse? Al yedei habishol, through the cooking process. Now, aval legabe yayin mifustar, okay, which means pasteurized. Okay, you go to a lot of products, you look at it, it says pasteurized. Well, for sure, milk, but definitely the grape juice. Grape juice is definitely pasteurized. I don't know if it's wine pasteurized.
Yes.
Yeah, Simeon says yes. Jeffrey
Yes,
Berger?
we were in Napa Valley a few years ago on an APAC convention.
Okay.
We went, they toured a lot of the wineries in the Napa Valley, and there was one winery that was kosher there, and we had a chance to really speak to the proprietor.
Yeah.
And he explained that actually every winery pasteurizes their wine, and ergo, every wine is mevushal. And the reason they pasteurize it is to extend the shelf life of the product
In the United States.
in the United States.
That's in the domestic market, not
Right,
international.
right, in the United States.
So wine produced here in the United States is always pasteurized.
That's
Okay.
what he said.
Okay, so that's fascinating. So when it comes to pasteurized wine, this is the part that's was a little bit like I was taken aback by reading what I read. He writes here, "Aval legaba yayin mefustar," but like pasteurized wine. Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach paskin in his Sefer Mincha Shlomo Shebazeh L'chol Hadayos Birchas Borei Pergafen. Okay, that's fine. It's Borei Pergafen. Kevin Shelo Hishtana Ta'amo, because the taste hasn't changed with the pasteurization process. V'lo nechsar midaso, and it hasn't taken away from it the measurement of it. Usually, when you boil something, I guess you diminish the amount or whatever the concentrate. Says it doesn't change it. V'lachein gam mutar lefaster yayin b'shvius. During the Shmut, you ought to take wine that is produced during the Shemitah year and pasteurize it because you're not decreasing it. You know, when you talk about peiros shvius, you can't do something to sort of destroy it, or you have to all the parts of peiros shvius have to be consumed. That's why if you finish fruit, people who eat fruits or vegetables of trees, you have to use every crumb of it. And then when you put it in a special, pach, that is for shvius fruits and vegetables, that it rots in order for you to be able to then dispose of it. Okay. Va'af natsar hayayin b'maga shel nocher. This was the part that was surprising, that pasteurized wine is still subject to the prohibition of maga shel nocher, of the movement of the nocher, what we call stam yenam. If it's cooked, it's not a problem. It's not a problem. But pasteurization doesn't count for these purposes, according to Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, as mevushal. So pasteurization, according to Rav Shlomo Zalman, is not mevushal. Mevushal is cooked. Pasteurization, even though of course I know it involves boiling is not considered mevushal for the purposes of getting you out of the problem of maga shel nochri, of the touching of a nochri. And by the way, he also quotes Rav Elyashiv, who says she'an mefustar pasteurized wine lo hishtano shmo v'ta'amo v'lachein hu biglal gzeras chazal she'asru yayin shenogam al nochri. And Rav Elyashiv also paskin like this, that pasteurized wine is not considered what we label on the bottles yayin mevushal. Okay. So just keep that in mind, which may answer the question of what, although Simeon sounds like whoever was giving Simeon the tour of that winery in Napa Valley, said that if it's pasteurized, it's automatically mevushal. At least according to these two poskim from the 20th century, not the case. So at least it's a machlokas. I'm sure there are those who might say that it is, but at least to just be aware that not everyone agrees that pasteurized wine is gets you out of the problem of what. So what do they? What is the process of pasteurization? Someone will know better than me. What do they do when they pasteurize it?
From what I understand of the wine tour we took, which was at Hagafen, they explained that pasteurization raises it to a certain temperature and keeps it there only a very, very, very short time. It doesn't really boil the wine.
Which by the way fit very nicely with why it's saying it's not
right.
But it's not
So it raises the temperature enough to destroy whatever it is it's supposed to, but it's kept at that temperature a very, seconds.
right.
Very little time.
We wouldn't consider that mevushal. It wasn't like it's boiling or anything like that.
Right. Exactly.
Right,
Okay.
right.
Okay, so just be aware. Maybe everyone agrees then that pasteurized. That clears. By the way, what Hinda just explained clarifies everything I just said. Or
Yeah.
better yet, what Rav Shlomo Zalman and Rav Elyashu. I'm not taking credit.
But I think, Rav, that you're touching on two separate prohibitions for yayin.
Correct. What yayin mevushal in terms of the non-Jew touching is
That's stam yenam.
right. Stam yainam. Correct.
But the other one, the biggie, is yayin nesach.
Right. Correct. Yayin nesach. But I would imagine that if we still consider it potentially for stam yainam, then yayin nesach is also on the table still. Meaning a non-Jew might use that, for their nesachim because it's still considered that kind of a wine. Right? The whole thing about mevushal is like, they wouldn't use that for yayin nesach, so you don't have to worry about that. Yeah, Jeffrey. The OU, what's the OU policy?
Today, there used to be a lot of they get rid of bacteria.
Yeah.
They don't anymore. They say that pasteurized, meaning is usually low temperature, or it should be mevushal according to Moshe Feinstein.
Right.
It has to go above 175 degrees.
Quarter of Moshe has to go above 175. Yeah.
Make sure that it's above 175. If it gets above 175, even for a short period of time, for them, that's what they.
Then they'll label it mevushal. Okay, so those of you who were on Zoom,
No, we didn't hear.
let me explain what Jeffrey was doing. Jeffrey was doing some research from the OU, and the OU's policy, which follows in the Rav Moshe Feinstein, is that if the temperature gets above 175 degrees, even for a short amount of time, then it is considered mevushal. They'll label it mevushal. He also said that they claim. So I think that Simeon and Hinda have some sources here that may differ. Who say that most wines are not pasteurized, though it sounds like from what the research of our shear that the wines in the United States at least are, and if in the pasteurization process it gets above 175, then even for a short amount of time, then it'll be labeled. If it's an OU product, it will be labeled as mevushal on the bottle. Okay, so now you know. You have
But Rav, when I learned this halacha the first go round, my understanding was that under stam yenam, even if it's mevushal, and if you're sitting with a non-Jew, you may not drink with him, or if he serves it to you, the non-Jew. No, the serving he can do, but you can't sit and drink with a non-Jew.
Yes,
even if it's mevushal.
That's correct. This is a discussion that comes up in the Yoredeya in Kuf Gimel, Kuf Yudal, somewhere in that range, about consuming alcoholic beverages with along with a non-Jew, and they're talking about going to a bar there. Interesting things that are quite practical, actually. Be'ezras Hashem, when we finish Orach Chaim, we'll get to Yoredei and we'll discuss it. We're probably about 10 years off from there, but we'll get there.
Rav, you're gonna be lonely.
Yeah, no. We'll all be sitting around still talking about it. Yeah, Jeffrey.
I don't know. I don't know. 10 years. I don't know.
We'll be there. Yes, we'll all be here. Yes, go ahead.
State that the Rav Shlomo Zalman and other Israeli poskim,
Yes.
they may argue that you would need to have it above a certain temperature, a
Longer period.
OU. According to
No.
distance to get to 175.
So there's an acknowledgement of this machlokas.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
for like a relatively short period of time, and then if you cool immediately, that's fine according to the OU.
Right.
But others may not.
Okay, there you go. So Jeffrey clarified that the OU does note that Rav Shlomo Zalman and some other Israeli poskim, Rav Elyashiv, will tell you that just hitting a certain temperature for a short amount of time is not considered mevushal. So it's a machlokas here. Rav Moshe seems to have the more lenient opinion, which the OU follows. But be aware that there are poskim who are not minor poskim. Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach and Rav Elyashiv are not to be ignored. So the OU acknowledges that there are those who hold a little more strict than they do, who would require it to be at a higher temperature for a longer period of time. I'm not sure what that number is, but the OU policy to labeling yain mevushal is following in the steps in the opinion of Rav Moshe Feinstein. In Israel, it's hard to find yain mevushal. Is that because they label they don't label the wines like Rav Moshe? They might follow Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, right? And if you're following Rav Shlomo Zalman, then it's probably harder to find why that's mevushal in Israel, which makes sense. So now I think maybe you understand. Perhaps today this was enlightening for me what you all shared. It shows, by the way, that perhaps the majority of the time when you see a yain mevushal on the bottle, it's because of the pasteurization process that it's going through in America. Whereas the very same process that may be happening in Israel won't get the stamp of yain mevushal on it. Yeah.
That pasteurization, that they require a higher temperature than.
Rav Shlomo Zalman. Oh, the OU. Oh, okay, got it.
Rabbi.
Right. Got it. Yes, Tommy.
These days, if you look at any bottle of wine, it's got multiple hechsherim on it.
Right.
So I would imagine that they follow the stricter rules. So no question.
Perhaps, yeah, perhaps. I don't know how it's so interesting with the policy. Unless you put it next to your hashgacha, I'm not sure. I'm not sure how that works. Okay, let's keep going here though, because Stam Yedem wasn't truly our topic today, but we took a little aside on that. We talked about also. I mentioned before that there's an opinion. The opinion says that it's okay. Why is it okay if the Rambam says it's not okay? So just giving you a little background here. So the Aruch HaShulchan says that Rabbeinu Tam, the Ri, the Itur, the Rush, all say that it's fine. V'ta'amam, says the Aruch HaShulchan, Barur, dezeh shepasla hator mevushal b'nisachim. The reason that there's a psul for nisachim when it comes to mevushal is not lo mipnei griusa. Some of the other categories that they weren't fitting for the mizech because the wine was lower quality. Something was wrong with it. It's Shaharei Mishanesh Lema Shanino Bereish Perik Vidal the Maseches Trumos the Mevushal Adifte. Actually, in Maseches Trumos, it makes it sound like a wine that is Mevushal actually is preferred. The reason it's a problem is because it's changed from its original. Cooking it changes. Even in halacha, we look at it on Shabbos. So I can't cook food because it's changed. Mishtana, how it's literally the shinoi and the chemical, whatever. On a very nitty gritty level, the food has changed in terms of its nature. Same thing with wine that's cooked. And the pasuk says in Parshas, I think it's Emor, Parshas Emor, Uchsiv zevach unesachim. Ma zevach, the Gemara says in Bechoros, ma zevach shelo nishtane. Just like a sacrifice hasn't changed, it's the original, the original animal, you didn't do anything to it. Af nesachem shelo nishtanu. the Nesachim also can't have gone through a change. And therefore, the problem with the Yayin Mevushal on the Mizbeach, the Psul, is because of the changing of its nature. Not a problem in terms of its taste, in terms of its, what it is. Now, that is the underpinnings of why those who permit Yayin Mevushal to be used for Kiddush say that it's okay. Because it's nothing, there's not a Psul in the taste or the nature. It's changed. Mevushal changed its chemical makeup. Okay, just wanted to give you that yisod of what's going on here. Now, what about the mead? The yayin sheyesh bo dvash, sif katan chaf, sheyesh bo dvash, kein konditon. Anyone look that up? By the way, I looked that one up. Konditon is spiced wine. Spiced wine. Shenasa miyayin udvash upilpilin. Okay, which is made from wine, honey, and peppers. Anybody ever consumed that? I have not. Okay. All right. So that is in the Gemara. That's the kunditon is the word that you'll find in the Gemara, and it is described as a spiced wine, which would make sense that there's pepper in it. Okay. Even though it changes the taste, because how could you put pepper in something and not change the taste? Vereche, and also the smell. It doesn't matter. That still is considered wine. Now, Sifkat Chaf Aleph, the opinion that says you can't make Kiddush on these, says Afilu im nosan bodvash kolshu. Even if you put a shtickle of honey, a tiny drop, done. The Rambam says, forget about it. You call that wine? That's not wine. And the osan on ha'anashim.
And it's therefore permitted.
No. You can't use it for Kiddush. If you put a drop of honey, according to the Rambam holds that it's shahakol basically already at that point, essentially. He thinks if you mix it with honey, that's no longer in the category of wine.
Are you addressing the Isur of Nesachim here?
No, here we're talking about back to Kiddush. Nesachim, for even everybody agrees for Nesachim that's not ideal. Right? But here, for the purposes of Kiddush, the Rambam even says that once you mix dvash into the process, I'm looking over here where he gives us some sources, the Aruch HaShulchan. He says, yeah, so the Rambam holds that it's no good. No good if you put wine if you honey in the wine. So here we're talking about even the Kiddush. He holds the vushal is a problem, and yayin with mixed with honey is a problem, and therefore he says the osan ha'anoshim shemasimim meidvash by yayin lamatek o masimim sham tzuker yesh lahachmir lefi dvarav. Therefore, there are some people. Now he speaks more generally. According to the second opinion, if you have wine and some people don't like it, sometimes it's very dry, they take a little drop of honey and they put the honey into, they take a little mead, or maybe they mix a little mead into, mead dvash is probably mead, and they mix it into the regular wine, or they take some sugar and they start putting the sugar into the wine. According to the second opinion, yesh lahachmir lefi dvarav. That, according to that opinion, the second opinion, you have to be machmir if you do that. That wouldn't work. Now, the good news is here, maybe, if you turn the page and you go to the Ramah, the top, he tells us, top line on my page at least, I hope I gave you the right instructions here. The Ramah says, "V'hamirag lekadesh alav afilu yesh lo yayin acher." That the minhag gets to follow the first opinion, so long as there isn't something better than the cooked wine or the mead. Now, that may not be hard to find, but that actually may be. And I want to set the table for what was about to come in Sif Test by explaining the following about this line. Yeah, Jeffrey, go ahead.
I wonder if what they are talking about, meaning when you buy a bottle of wine now, they will say there are hints of pepper and pear or whatever it is. Meaning, I think that when wines are made in today's time, I actually think they mix some of these things in it.
To enhance the
Very,
taste,
very small amounts, give it a drop of
flavor.
nectar or flavor or whatever.
Right.
Other people make, and maybe that's what they are referring to, right? Is that it's not purely grape, right? Like
Correct.
everyone does,
That's what the Rambam, even a kol shehu of honey. Kol shehu is as a drop.
which is pretty much every flower.
Right. So the Machmir opinion would say that doing such a thing is, yesh lahachmira. Be Machmir on that. But the minhag is to make kiddush on even a yayin that is mevushal or that has zvash, as long as there's nothing better out there. If you have something better, then use the better wine. That's the general principle that if we haven't noticed yet, hopefully now you notice that that's generally the principle. Use the best wine that you have when you're doing a mitzvah with it. As Jeffrey was Mekayim here for us on Friday. He brought the best bottle of wine in the house. Okay. Take a look at Chav Beis and Chav Gimel. Oh, I wanted to make a point before I read that, which was that wine, we take it for granted, it's clear. Wine, the accessibility to wine is something that we don't have any issue with where we live. I would argue that most Jews today in the world have pretty good access to wine. It's clear from doing a little bit of reading. This was not the case, even 100 years ago, which goes back to what Steve pointed out to us, I think last week, about the raisin wine, the recipe that Steve Keller found with the raisin wine. There's a reason that they were searching, that they were, mitapel with recipes for raisin wine for Pesach. We're going to see in a moment here that not having wine accessible was not as uncommon as we may think, or it was not as accessible because of the cost in comparison to other alcoholic beverages. We're going to get to that in a moment. So I'm just giving you a foreshadowing of what's to come in a moment. Chaf Beis in the Mishnah Berurah, he says l'kadesh alav, that you can the minhag is to make kiddush on mevushal wine or honey wine. V'alkein mutar levashal hatzimukin u'lesanen hayayin u'lekadesh alav, says the Chaye Adam quoted here. Therefore, it's permissible to cook the raisin. Or here he goes back to the raisin wine, to cook raisins and then to strain the wine out so that you only have the wine, not the raisins themselves, and to make kiddush upon it. Okay, so here it's not even that you took the grapes and then you pasteurized it, you cooked the grape juice. Here, you cooked the raisins in water. You strained the raisins out. Therefore, the Chayyadim says this because we allow Yain Mevushal. It also allows us to have the Yain Simukim, the raisin wine, which is just raisins cooked in water. But there are those the Yesh Machmir de Lo Nikra Yain Ad Sheyiyeh Toseh Shlosh Achar Bishul Ad Simukim. There are those who are Machmir to not call that wine until you've let the raisins, the wine that was the raisin wine,
the liquid, right?
the liquid that has been raisinified to sit for 3 days. Okay, then you can call it wine after it has some fermenting opportunities. Chav Gimel, she'eno tov v'chulei. As long as you don't have a wine that's better, you can use the yain mevushal or the honey wine. The im heim shavim, because if you have something that is equal, yesh lachos ledas hayesh omrim shemachmir mazel l'shelo lekadesh. So we should give deference to the second opinion, which is machmir, and use the wine that is better. Ule'inyan bracha, when it comes to what bracha we make, kvar nifsak le'el b'pshitus. We've said clearly previously the Simon Reish Beis Sif Aleph, which we learned probably 45 years ago already at this point, that you make borei pri hagafen on that on the yain mevushal and on the mead, and so that ends our discussion about yain mevushal and also the honey wine. All right, now coming to Siftes.
Rav,
Yes.
Rav, what bracha would you make if you ate just raisins?
Borei pri ha'etz.
Okay,
And
so
you make a al ha'etz v'al pri ha'etz as the bracha acharona.
so you have no difficulty in jumping from the raisins being recognized as raisins to now they're recognized as part of the guffin.
Grapes go through the same process, though. If I eat a grape plain, it's also Haborei Priya Eitz. And if I eat the Bracha Chonas Al Eitz Vel Priya Eitz, only when it's turned into wine does it turn into Haborei Priya Gafen, and then the Bracha of Al Gefen Vel Priya Gefen. So it's really, raisins in that way are thank you, are grapes. Anyway, so I think it should be treated the same. Okay. Nazir is the same thing. Nazir can't consume raisins. Correct. Nazir can't consume raisins. That's right. Okay. So now we're up to Sif Test. This is perhaps one of the most practical things we've learned in a long time, because people engage in this every Shabbos. We're up to the Sif that talks about using alcoholic beverages. But I want to start by reading the words of the Shulchan Aruch, and then we're going to go back. Aruch HaShulchan, as I previewed to you, has a lot to say about this topic.
The way you say it, like you would think that you're not allowed to use it.
Oh, you already read ahead. Yeah, let's take a look here. Yeah, so, and then I'll give you some background from the Aruch HaShulchan in terms of what some of the Rishonim are saying. And then we'll talk about the minhag, because the Aruch HaShulchan acknowledges one thing about the minhag, and he says, he's confused about the minhag a little bit, but he defends. But in his Kedarko, Hakodesh, he defends the minhag. So I'm not here to change anyone's practices. I want to actually be very upfront about that. My particular practice is that I do not use sheikhar to make kiddush on Shabbos day, but I am not here to tell others that they shouldn't do that, because many great rabbonim, as the Aruch HaShulchan says, do this as well. He's just what? What was that? I have little children. Anyways, I use grape juice. Fair enough. Fair enough. But I'm pretty much actually. David Noble was telling me this Shabbos. It sounds like he made kiddush this Shabbos for the shkami. Is that right? So he told me something. Maybe he used schnapps or something. He said at one point, he goes, I should use grape juice. So I use grape juice. There you go. I'm changing some of my Talmidim, but you don't have to change for me. I really don't think that you have to change. Okay. So the Shulchan Aruch says the following: "B'mokom she'ein yayin matzoi." Those are very important words that should not be forgotten. He starts by saying, in a place where wine cannot be found, right? Where wine is not found, right? Correct. Where wine cannot be found. Then let's proceed to the next step. Yesh omrim shemikadshin al shechar ushar mashkin chutz min hamayim. Then there are those that say that you can make kiddush on shechar, beer, okay, ushar mashkin, and other beverages, chutz min hamayim, aside from water. And you're like, what was the havamina? I should make kiddush on water? We'll get back to what that means, because that's a funny line, but it actually is very telling because of a phrase called Chamar Medina. Anyone know what Chamar Medina means?
Beer.
Could be beer. What is that actually? How do you translate it, though? Sheikhar really is beer. How do I translate Chamar Medina? What is that? Good. So Richie said Chamar, as we've talked about, Chamra is the Aramaic, right? We talk about wine. Chamar Medina is the wine of the country. Because what happens when you don't have actual wine? You treat a certain other beverage as if it were wine, because wine was typically consumed with most meals. People didn't have water like we have today. You go to the faucet and you turn the water on and you drink water with your meal, or you have soda. People were most often consume with their meal wine. Wine was what they had easily accessible, because you could store wine. Yes, you could store water too. You have to be careful with that, just like you have to be careful with wine as well. So wine was consumed often with meals. Maybe not every single meal, but wine was commonly consumed. What happens if you don't have wine? Something else is going to take its place. You're not going to not drink anything. So that beverage, whatever becomes the most commonly consumed beverage in the place of wine, becomes called Chamar Medina. Okay, it's the wine of the country, but it's not actually wine. But that's really what this is talking about. So that's when he says ushar mashkin means other drinks. But even what can never be called Chamar Medina? Water. If you always are drinking water, wonderful, good for you, healthy, keeps you hydrated. Then you cannot consider that, even if that's the commonly consumed beverage. No, there's other beverages available. You can never consider water to be chamar medina that you could then use it to as a backup option, make kiddush upon it. Okay, that's why the chutz min hamayim is pointed out here. Other beverages could fall into that category. Okay, so let's hold on to that thought. We have more to say about that. We're not done with that topic. V'yesh omrim. Now there are those that say she'ein mekadshim. Sorry, you cannot use sheikhar or other beverages to make kiddush, which would mean that you are stuck. There's nothing you can do aside from, we'll talk about using the bread, but you cannot substitute wine out. So because they're talking about here on Friday night, what would you do on Friday night? One opinion is that on Friday night, take a beer, you have no wine available, take a beer, make it with a shahakol over the beer. Second opinion says, sorry, you can't do that. So what do we do? Ula harash. Not every day, by the way, in the Shulchan Aruch, as we quote the name of the part, of the Rishon that we're following. Ula harash, balayla lo yikadesh al hasheichar ela al hapas. He says, at night, we're going to paskin that you can't use sheichar. Friday night kiddush, never can you use alcoholic beverages. Only, other alcohol, only wine. So, rather you would make kiddush over the bread. Uva boker, but for your Shabbos day meal, yoser tov lekadesh ala sheichar. He says better if you don't have wine available. Again, b'makom she'ein yayin matzui. Then you can use in the morning sheichar, beer. Sheyavarech alav shehakol. You'll make the bracha upon it of shehakol. Koda birchas hamotzi, before you make the bracha of hamotzi on the challah. Sheyavarech al hapas tchila, because if I just go right on Shabbos morning right to the bread, ein kan shum shinui. There is no shinui. There is no difference. What does he mean by that?
No, you're not demonstrating, or you're not sort of set aside it. It's just part of the deal. It's not going to accept.
Why on Friday night is it different though? If I use bread on Friday night, why is it different?
One brings in Shabbos, the other you just acknowledge it. Still in the morning, the next day.
No,
Even simpler.
or doing bread.
Because there I have a whole kiddush bracha. Okay, I mean praise. I have mostly says, but it is a shinoi. It's a different feel. But on Shabbos day, what is the extent of the kiddush? It's the bracha. It's bar paragaf and all the other stuff that people add in. Al tashiv mishabar raglecha b'ptochav secha davar davar and v'shavar v'nisal Shabbos and al kein beracha. It's very nice. It's really meant to enhance the mitzvah. I'm not saying don't do it, by the way. But at its core, the whole kiddush is Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Borei Paragafen. So if I just do hamotzi lechem in aretz, it just looks like I'm eating a meal. So there's no shinui. It doesn't look like I'm doing anything different than if I were having lunch on Thursday afternoon. It just happens to be a Saturday today, So in order for there to be a shinui, he says it's better to make kiddush on sheichar, because the fact that you stuck a shehakol over a beverage before you had your hamotzi at least creates some sort of shinui for how you would normally do a meal. Normally, the first thing you do at a meal is you make hamotzi. By putting an extra, by consuming the alcohol beforehand, you made a shinui.
Even though it says shakol.
Even though you said shahakol, but yes, we should have had the wine. That would have been better. But in the place where there's no wine, better to stick the shahakol over the beer or whatever schnapps you want than to do nothing, than to just go ahead and make hamotzi. V'divrei ta'amhem. I love this, by the way. Rarely do you see this. He says, this is very reasoned, these are reasoned words. Divrei ta'amhem. He's Shulchan Aruch. He gives you A, B, C, D. Here he says, this makes sense. This makes sense. So he splits the rush splits the baby here, right? To use the Shlomo HaMelech metaphor, right? On the one hand, he says at night, do not even consider using beer, but Shabbos day, go ahead and use the beer, right? So, and the Ramah, let's just read one little phrase from the Ramah here. We're not going to read the whole Ramah because it gets to a different topic. V'chein haminhag pashut k'divrei harash. That the minhag, the minhag that is to become simply accepted by everybody is the words of the Rush. This opinion that at night you don't use the alcohol, the beer. During the day you can, but again, the context matters here. It's b'mokom she'ein yayin matzui. Now, boy, oh boy, do I have what to say about this topic. Okay. And there's a lot that there's Shavura says, but I'm going to look at the Aruch HaShulchan for a moment with everybody. So you just listen for just a moment. So he quotes the just to give you the context of the Rishonim about this. So he says the following: Aruch HaShulchan Aruch, Kasav HaRambam. I guess this is probably Hilchot Shabbat here. Probably the same parak as previously cited, which was, let's see here. But he's doing a lot of quoting of the Rambam. What is it? Oh, parak Chaf Tes. Okay, Din Yud Zayin in Hilchot Shabbat. Medina Shirov Yena Shechar. He says in a place where the majority of people are drinking beer, right? When they're drinking along with their meal, they drink beer. Afal Pisha who pasal a kiddush, even though he uses very strong words here, even though it says it's invalid for kiddush. He doesn't leave any wiggle room. It's invalid for kiddush to use beer. Mutar lahavdil alav. He says you can do havdalah on it. I'll allow havdalah on beer. Hoel v'hu chamar mihamedina, because that's the chamar. I understand what the term chamar hamedina, because that's treated like wine in your country. People drink that commonly with their meals. Ad kan lashon. Quote of the Rambam. Now the Aruch HaShulchan explains. Kolomar, as if to say, Sharov shtiyas anshe hamakom hu shecher. The majority of what's consumed in that place is beer. Aval kiddush b'chol gavnei aser. But to use it for kiddush, still the Rambam thinks, sorry, no good, aser. The kiddush lo niskan al hayayin, rak al hayayin, v'lo al mashke acheres. The Rambam looks at the Gemara. I read the Gemara. You read the Gemara. It says wine. That's why it talks about borei priagafen, right? We'll talk about the hamotzi as perhaps a backup on the bread if I don't have, but no one says you could do. He says Rambam is saying mehecha tasty that you can make kiddush on beer. It doesn't say it in the Gemara. So the Rambam would think that you make the bracha hamotzi is your next option. And if you love the bread even more than the wine, maybe you should make the bracha on the kiddush on the bread instead of the wine. That's even a thought. But no one would ever consider beer. We talked about that, by the way, actually earlier. We don't do that generally. We don't, even if you do like the bread. That's not how we do things. According to the interpretation of the Rambam, there should be no difference between nighttime or daytime kiddush. No beer. Because the Rambam wouldn't have left that unexplained. He would have said, this is only at night, but during the day you could do that. Because he does say by Havdalah you could do it. The fact that he doesn't list the exception of Kiddush Bayom means that it's not an exception for him. Beer is not usable. But okay, now that when you make Kiddush on bread on Shabbos day, there's no differentiation. Okay, Kevin the Lekar Rak Birchas Lamotzi Bikomoko Mabekach. The Heker Hu Belechem Mishneh. The Kavan also the Shem Kiddush says, I disagree. There is a Heker. When you make Hamotzi on a regular day, you have a sandwich of one piece of bread. On Shabbos, the Hamotzi is on Lechem Mishneh. So there is a Heker. There is a differentiation here in this process. So the Rambam is not worried about these things. So it's very clear, by the way, from the Psak of the Rambam, beer is Pasal L'Kiddush, even during the day. Now, the Aruch HaShulchan quotes some of the other Rishonim here. V'hinei gam harif, kosav v'perak arvei psachim, the ein mikachim ela al hayayin. You only make kiddush on wine, says the Rif. Another very important posting, right? Rak im choviv alei pas mekadosh al pas. Unless you hold that bread is more beloved, then make kiddush on the bread, which we don't do. But that's the only cutout here. V'zeu das hagaonim hakanonim. The gaonim also follow this approach. Rav Amram Gaon, Rav Tzemach Gaon, Rav Nisim Gaon, v'chei das haravya, the Maharami Rutenberg. I'm not even sure who this person is. He quotes Hagos Maimonides. Maybe it's Hagos Maimonides. Aval. So you have all these Rishonim, the Gaonim, everybody. You can't use beer, alcohol. You can't use it for kiddush, balaylo, bayom. Okay. Havdalah, yes. I think that no one disagrees about Havdalah. Havdalah you can use. Havdalah we'll get to when we get to Havdalah. That's coming down the pike. When we get to Havdalah, we can use it for Havdalah. But but when it comes to Kiddush, this whole list that I just listed for you, that's a lot of going in, by the way. A lot of early commentators on the Gemara don't subscribe to using Sheikhar. Yeah,
to
Bruce.
differentiate the yom, how could you do it just on bread?
So the Rambam will tell you the differentiation is that in terms of being different from a weekday is I have Lechem Mishnah. Lechem Mishnah. So it does look different. It's a different setup. Now, he says here, Aval Harush Beperak Arbe Psachim, the rush comes to rescue all those who make Kiddush on Shechar. Kaslav Shemekashin al Shechar Imhu Chamar Medina. He says you can make Kiddush on Shechar given that it's considered Chamar Medina, meaning that people are drinking this quite frequently and consuming a lot of it in this country. V'shekain das Ri Bala Tosfos, and the Ri, who was one of the Bala Tosfos, Vira Avan, Velazeh, Iskimu Rov HaGeonim Ayin Sham, Ve'emes, Demi Gemara. It's true that from the Gemara, Mashma Lehedya, the Ein Chilu Ben Kiddush LaHavdalah, it would seem that there's no differentiation between Kiddush and Havdalah. She'omer Sham the Rav Shmuel, quoting from Rav and Shmuel, Sabre, that they hold together. Kishem she'ein mekadshim al shechar, just like you can't make Kiddush on shechar, it says in the Gemara. Kach ein mavdilin al shechar. So you're allowed to make Havdalah on shechar. But v'im kain kemo de behavdalah lo kaim alan kain kemo kain bekiddush. So the Rush goes to this source and he says, you know that some people allow it, but if we really are to follow the logic of the Gemara of Rav and Shmuel, who don't differentiate between Kiddush and Havdalah, and we do in the end, or at least some do, but if you follow the approach of Rav and Shmuel in the Gemara that don't differentiate between Havdalah and Kiddush, so then you have to follow this to its logical conclusion. V'od isa sham the Rav Kaddish Ashikra. Then there's this other Gemara that says Rav Kaddish Ashikra. He made Kiddush on Shikra, on beer. And that's the opposite of what the Gemara just brought in the name of Rav. So how do you explain the contradiction in the two Gemaras? He says when it says you can't make Kiddush on Shechra, that's when it's not Chamar Medina. But when Rav was making Kiddush on the Shechra, so there's a Rosh, all these guys explain, that's when it was considered Chamar Medina. Chamar Medina is very subjective to the place where you live. It could be that in one place something is considered Chamar Medina, and in another place it's not. And it could be that in a certain place that there's no Chamar Medina. Because people are they of course you drink other things, but the majority of people are consuming wine with most of their food. So he says that's how he explains the difference in these two Gemaras. So that opens up the window here, because the Rambam was looking at the first Gemara and says, sorry, Shechar is off the table, Kiddush, Abdallah, and everything. But if you read it, the Gemara this way, it opens up the door to saying the following. He says, Vizu kiraya l'shita samatirim. Those who permit, this is their proof. Al kopanim ein raya la'osrim, and this is it's not a proof for those that prohibit this. Omnam the Yerushalmi, what about the other guys? They're going to fight back. They're going to say, no, there's a Gemara in Yerushalmi and Brachos in the beginning of the 8th parak that explains like the Mefurash Kehaosrim Sheomer. It says in the Yerushalmi Sham Mavdilim below Yayin Ela ala Shechar ve'ein mekadshim below Yayin. Then when it comes to Havdalah, Havdalah below Yayin Ela ala Shechar. There you can make Havdalah on Shechar, but ve'ein mekadshim below Yayin. But you can't make Kiddush without wine. Right? You can make Havdalah without wine, but you can't make Kiddush without wine. So there's an explicit Yerushalmi that seems to follow the first approach. The Hamatirim, those who permit, lo choshu lazeh. Kevin the Gemara hu lehepech. That's the Yerushalmi. We follow the Bavli, so we don't have to worry about that, right? The Harash Kasav, the Rush writes, sheyesh lomar dezeh b'makom she'eno chamar medina, right? The Gemara in Brachos, that's because there was no chamar medina. That's why they said you couldn't make Kiddush. So this all stems on how to read a few Gemaras, and now you see there are two approaches here. There are two vast approaches. One that says you cannot make Kiddush on anything but wine. Maybe challah is the backup. And the other approach who says it's on the table as long as it's Chamar Medina. It has to be labeled as such. Right? Maybe you got to put it on the bottle. Chamar Medina. Right? So now what happens? He quotes the Aruch HaShulchan quotes what I read you in the Shulchan Aruch. Okay? And after he closes the quote, okay, I have to find where he says here. He says here, he says the Rabbeinu, if you remember, Rabbeinu Tam doesn't like making Kiddush on bread. Okay? And he says also, the Rif and the Rambam hold that it's certainly a problem to make Kiddush. So at night, what do we try to do? We try to make it on the wine, for sure. Aval bayom behechrech la'avur al da'asam de'im lo kain ein kan heker v'shinui. So, okay, better we'll make, as a backup on Friday night, we'll use the bread. Okay, yeah, Rabbeinu Tam doesn't like it, but as somebody quoted, I remember when I was preparing, Rabbeinu Tam on that discussion is a das yechidah. Everybody disagrees with him that challah is a suitable backup. Only he is of that opinion. But to be lavor al das harambam ha'arif on Friday night, it's ridiculous. So you have to use wine, and then challah is the backup. But during Shabbos day, when there's no clear heker, even though the Rambam might tell you lecha mishnah is the heker, but they'll say, well, come on, it's just bread. Bread is bread is bread. Two slices, one slice. So therefore, then we'll rely on the opinion of the Rosh and others on Shabbos day. But Im said also, by the way, there's less on the line. Kiddush on Friday night is Del Raisa. Shabbos day is the Rabbanon. V'dim halacha hechriu deloka harama veloka Rabbeinu Tam elav shebemokum she'anu yichol latzis deosem mutala asos kain. Which means that if there's wine, you should try to be yotzi l'chol deos. Right? Everybody, there's no argument about the wine. Wine is perfectly acceptable. V'im b'yicholas, but what if I'm not able to? Mokamina adina. Then you follow this approach. This approach to Friday night, no. Use the bread, and Shabbos day you can use sheicha. Okay? The Yoser Mehadrin Latzeis Yidei Harambam Latzeis Yidei Rabbeinu Tam. Why? If they should das Rabbeinu Tam, he das Yechidai. Okay, if you mess up on the Rabbeinu Tam, don't use not using challah, he's a one-off opinion. Everybody else disagrees with him. But the Rambam and the Rif, and these guys are heavy hitters of the Gaon, many of the Gaonim. To ignore them is not simple. Now, how much time do we have? Probably got way over time. Okay. All right. So maybe I have to stop here. We'll do this. We'll have a full treatment next week. So there are Chashulchan. I'm going to copy this recipe for next week so everyone can participate in this. But what we'll do is that he goes into a whole paragraph here about why wine is not so easy to come by. Stop. He says the kishiyesh. This is all the kishiyesh yayin ba'ir lo yikadash al pas devali yayin mitzvah min urufchar gam balayla gam bayom. But he says miu. He says gedole hador nahagu b'shachar levarach hasheichar. He said he starts listing it, the Bach and the Magen Avram and the Maharshal and Shachna, and he says asukein v'hayalahem yayin, and they had wine available. They start to explain, but and he says and maybe yayin is so expensive, and the whiskey was comparatively much less expensive. I know today, by the way, it's the hepech. But hey, the whiskey is much more expensive than the wine. At least when I go to the wine store, it's the whiskey section. It's like goodbye. I'm going to go over here. Right. You get what you're paying for. You're saying you get more. You get bang for your buck. It'll last. So you can drink it to the last drop. Right. Then it's a waste of the wine. If I correct. So he's going to explain that in his country that there are those who explain that sheichar is chamar medina, but this opens the door. He's going to talk about there are those who hold that chalav, and he says v'tei matok, sweet tea, are also considered chamar medina, right? This is going to open the door to a whole host of things. So we're going to see. He's going to say I don't like this. But then he's going to say, but what am I going to do? I'm going to apostle the kiddush of all these, frum yidin. I'm not going to do that. And he's going to explain why he thinks it's okay. Yeah. Well, by the way, that's exactly cited here by the Aruch HaShulchan as a chamar medina. He says, v'chalav hava mashke v'tei matok gamkei shosim harbe. People are consuming, with their milk. They drink milk with their meal. They drink tea with every meal, and he says, if you really want to be honest about it, the Aruch HaShulchan says, I'm not so sure we have any chamar medina today. The zulas yayin sraf, except for whiskey. The rov balabatim in medina seino ein shosim b'chol ol yayin v'lo shechar l'chol suda. What they drink during the weekdays? They're drinking whiskey. He says that, everyone comes home, they take a shot of whiskey. Yeah. All right. We'll continue this topic next week. I'm just gonna, turn the recording off so that way